Now, it's another fine shit of a day out there, so much so that I've actually decided to put on survival suit pants. Now, everything inside is an absolute mess because I have ground down all the tops of all the deck beams. I did that with a flat disc, so inside is an absolute mess at the moment. The other thing is it was actually fairly filthy before, just the inside of all the planking. Don't know how boats get so dirty on the inside. Even if I left this thing on the mooring with the hatches closed, everything just got really grimy. No idea where it comes from. So, as much as it pains me to do so, I think I may vacuum all that out and later power wash all inside. I would like to do it all with a little with a scrubbing brush and scrub it all, but that might keep my little girl busy in a while once I get the bones of all this horrendous dust out of it. Now, that's just how grimy where our chain locker is. But almost everything's like that in here. It just gets condensation and then it just gets horrible. Another thing that I've just done there now is I've taken all the ballast out of here. Now, when we put her in the water, we realised we needed quite a bit of internal ballast. And what we had at hand was iron fish plates. But, for example, this is what I've just cleaned out of the bilge after taking those out. So maybe this will be the year they get replaced with lead. We'll see. The difference in doing this now and doing this 9 years ago is that it's mucky, but everything's not rotten in there. Actually, I'm quite pleased all the paint we put on those floors is still there and all the bilge paint is perfectly intact. But that was all full of iron ballast as well. That board there is actually screwed down, goes up around the mast step. That's full of ballast under there too, which I'm going to have to root out. So as everything in this boat generally does, that escalated a bit. That's all the pig iron ballast. Took out mainly fish plates and all cast iron stuff. Yeah, good stack of that there. Now I'll give you a bit of a pre-wash walkthrough. Now, admittedly, this shed is bloody dark. I'm gonna have to buy some lights. My problem is the roof is so low, they won't be a whole lot of good. But it's the only shed I had that had enough height to actually fit this boat. It actually was an old carpenter's loft with a cow stall beneath, and that man, some ancient ancestor of mine, went on to become the fitter in the village. Coffin fitter, that is. Right, so it's down behind where the engine should be. Drive shaft coupling there and fuel tank. Small keg fuel tank. Not the easiest boat to get into. Yeah, it doesn't help that we added that bridge deck. Those are actually two teak beams going across there to brace the beam shelves together to try and stiffen up the whole boat. So here's the engine bay. Shaft goes out through the quarter in this, you might notice. That was because the original stern tube kind of severed the stern post in two. So the stern post was a bit narrow for a tube really. So we ran it out the quarter. Remnants of the old manifold and stuff in there. So it all cleared out. We just use a ceramic bowl as a sink there, and just a little Origo, I forget what they're called, alcohol stove. Now these all, 1 second, show you on this side actually. So these little doors open down, just form little worktops. So we can have plenty of worktops if we want, or what we used to do is put down the middle one and sit either side of it. And then fore cabin. Another thing we need to do, we always just pile life jackets and stuff in there for the kids to sleep on, but it needs a little V section there that can be removed, so we can actually have a kind of a double berth in here. It is long enough to sleep in. I actually prefer to sleep in here if I'm on my own than on the small bunks, because you can roll around and stuff in here a bit more comfortable. One thing that surprises me about this boat is she has quite a big heavy beam shelf. I mean, that's 4x2 beam shelf. There's one the same as her, same design in the boatyard, and that only has more like a 3x1, but she does not have bilge stringers. That Samson post has to go, unfortunately. Just got a bit of damage on the top of it. And that piece of timber that surrounds it also will probably get changed now. I don't know what happened there, but it must happen when the bowsprit was out. She, when she was tied up alongside or something, it crushed the mortise on the side of the post. Right, I've got a few sheets of thin plywood to start templating for the new deck. Had a few miserable days of rain, so I got all the inside scrubbed and washed. Couldn't really film any of that because yeah, it's just dark and miserable in here. So, got it all cleaned up a bit. It's all looking somewhat more respectable. I'm going to repaint everything anyway. Chain lockers and stuff there are cleaned out. A few bits to vacuum water out of and clear the drain holes, like in the bottom of that last step. There's my 1914 silver coin still in there. Yeah, all substantially better. And then washed all down in the back of all the cupboards and everything. So I might put a fan in here for a day or two just to make sure it gets all properly dried out and make sure there's no fresh water sitting anywhere. And got to vacuum some of that rubbish out of the bottom of the bilge as well that's been washed down. All dust and stuff. Now, got to get the Samson post out and move on with the deck. The Samson post is held in by just one screw down there, and it goes down into a tenon, so it gets all its strength by leverage. So it should just lift out now. Now, something a little frightening happened when I was taking out the Samson post. It was too long, it was hitting the roof when I was trying to get out, so I gave it a pull sideways and it snapped off. So, guess we're damn lucky it was being changed now. Got quite a fright with that. I knew there had been water, that the top of it had been quite open. I'd always been pouring in plenty of varnish and stuff into the top of it, and I was going to make a cap for it, and it was only this damage here next to this mortise was the only reason I was changing it. Yeah, completely rotten. As for the base, like, you know, it looks shiny and varnished. It was partially held in place, I suppose, by the beads around the deck and stuff, but yeah, once I've made a copy of it, I'm going to cut this and see what the extent of the rot was going down here further. But otherwise it was a pretty good looking piece of timber. So one of the first jobs we had to do on Teal was inspect the keel. So first thing we did was remove the garboards, and we could see the keel and bowney and the deadwoods were all in a pretty bad state. So with that we removed the ballast and went about buying a new keel. It was a 17.5 foot by 17 inches by 5.5 inch lump of I think it's quarter sawn oak. It was pretty hard to get. It was actually a much nicer cut than the original elm keel, but still it took us a while to find a piece big enough that was free of sapwood and knots and this and that. But it was a job that I had never seen done before at that point, so it was a bit of an undertaking, and we replaced the floors at the same time, along with the deadwoods, new stern knee, stern post, and later on the stem was done as well. Now, it's been a little while since I've done anything on here. February was very wet, so I didn't really do much with it at all, and also I was trying to keep cash flow in order. What I did do is got cheap ply and cut all this template, all these templates for the deck, and it also kept the inside of the boat fairly clean and dry over the last while, but as you can see it's covered in horrible mould from the dampness. That's the case with all plywood everywhere in all the sheds. Now we learned our lesson a bit last time with the other deck. You know, I wouldn't want to have had to do this a couple of years ago, but we are going to put a plywood epoxy deck on it now. I was going to do a layer of tongue and groove decking under it and then put a thin layer of ply and epoxy, but that's also seems to be a bit of a water trap really. So what I'm going to do is just groove the underside of the ply and just have it look like sheeting and epoxy both sides, and then the finished epoxy deck will look pretty much exactly the same as the canvas anyway, just with much better longevity, because like that, you know, we've pretty much ruined all the rubbing strips and tow rails and everything, which were all nice and new and quite a bit of work. All the deck fittings having to come off. Yeah, it's just not something you want to be doing again in a few years' time, and at the end of the day, bad deck will destroy the rest of the whole boat, so may as well just do it this way and be done with it. So I'm going to get all these templates off now, clean them off, and take them down to the workshop where I can actually work with a bit of space and light. There it is, all laid out in the yard. Looks small like that. I'm going to get it cleaned off now and take it in and mark it onto the heavier sheets. Now, as you can see, this is a much more pleasant working environment for doing this stuff. I've just cut the hatches, the Samson post and the mast step hole out of the deck in the template, just so I get an idea, and I've marked on the beams on that as well, so that when I epoxy, I'll epoxy the whole underside of the new stuff, but I won't paint where the beams are because I'm going to glue all that, so it'll all be very rigid. It's one of the benefits of having a plywood deck as opposed to the way it was. Now, we did glue the other one, which would have helped, but with a plywood deck, it's essentially like having big lodging knees, so it just gives the whole boat a lot of rigidity. I've got my new pieces there, just covered over, try and keep that all mildew off of them. Just 3/4 marine ply. I will, I'll mark those down now and get them cut out. Now, I've cut all the various pieces, and I just turned the foredeck upside down there to put the grooves into it. Not sure now whether I'll use a router bit like this or whether I'll just run the skill saw on it. This isn't as deep a V as I'd like. Now again, it's only the ceiling in the fore cabin, it's not exactly, don't have to be that fussy about it, but I do want it to look like planking from underneath. Okay, so got all the grooves routed into that. I'm actually quite pleased with how that turned out. So that'll be essentially the ceiling of the fore cabin. Ply seems decent enough. Good lot of plies and no voids or anything in it. So I'm happy enough with that. Plan at the moment is to get these kind of stacked and covered up well again, because the wet weather's going to start again. It's still too cold for epoxy really, and also I was having a bit of trouble getting any kind of reasonable size quantities of epoxy. I did find somewhere that has it now, so I will get it ordered, but again the temperature is just a bit low at the moment, so I think it would struggle to dry, so I'll coat them all both sides with epoxy and paint the underside before they go back near the boat.